to be dogmatic, because they're not, but more just to kind of give you stuff to think about during the course of the day, and hopefully over the course of the next few days. So I recently started using this cartoon because I think it's so incredibly important. Because this is really what's happened in the world. We've stopped having conversations, we stopped thinking about the importance of what we talk about, and instead we spend all our time thinking about how we're going to share it. Right? So, am I going to use Twitter? Am I going to use Facebook? Am I going to use, what is it that I'm going to do? As opposed to what is it I'm trying to say and how am I trying to get it across? And so, here's the question, like, have we evolved at all? So here's a cave painting that was done, I don't know, a million years ago, 200,000 years ago, a half a million, whatever, it makes no difference. We're still looking at it, we're still enjoying it, we're still understanding what the artists were trying to say to us. And this is what we've come to, right? Like, sext me and then get rid of it in 10 seconds. Hello? Like, tell me that's evolution. I'm not quite so sure. So what do we really want, right? What is it that we want from communications? We want community, right? We want efficiency, productivity. We want intimacy, critical. Collaboration, sharing, security, privacy. Right? And we also want openness. So some of these really are sort of a dichotomy, but that's kind of what we want. This all comes from doing polls and from talking to people. These are the critical things. Like, so do we get these or don't we? So this becomes, of course, the dichotomy. Are we broadcasting or are we in an intimate cast situation? Right? Which is it that we're doing? So what I find really interesting is that we talk about broadcast like it happened in the previous century, right? Because today we're all about one-to-one. That's a ton of crap, because most of what happens today in social media is in fact broadcast. There's a great piece, you can all Google or Bing it. I just saw my clients, so I always say that. You can either, but just look it up and check it. There was an FT, that's Financial Times editorial about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. They called Facebook the new broadcast TV. I thought it was brilliant, and it blew my mind that no one else picked it up, right? Because that's what we do, we broadcast. We hope lots of people see it. It's our 15 megs of fame. So we're not really doing what we set out to do. What we're doing is trying to replicate broadcast, because we all want to have that 15 megs of fame. So of course, the question then comes, like, what is it that we're sharing? Because to do that amount of broadcast, to do that amount of communication, to do that amount of sharing, if you will, we have to be telling people a lot of stuff. And maybe stuff we probably shouldn't be sharing, and we definitely did share way back when. So today, what's really interesting is that younger people tend to share less. They don't share more. It's people my age who have more friends. Ever remember Robert School? So Robert, back in the day, had 500 million friends on Facebook. Right? That was his claim to fame. And it propelled him. And the guy writes really well, he's really smart, but I have to tell you, he's sort of fallen off the edge the past few years, because that's no longer a measure. Because younger people don't see that as a plus. They don't get it, right? Because they don't want to share that much. They understand it. So then, of course, the question is, do we just abstain, right? Is this a question of abstinence? Because, and think about this, right? This is the analyst at Algebra Group, and I think this is great. When you're using a network-connected device, it's very hard to remain anonymous. The information propagates so quickly and gets stored so many places en route that the only sure way to prevent the problem is abstinence. So we wonder, right, why all those selfies and all those pictures and all those naked whatevers and all those bad things get shared when supposedly they're secure and they're private and whatever, because they are stored in multiple places. There are multiple things that happen whenever you share anything. And so is the only way out of that absence? Like, should we not share anything? Should we not post anything? Should we not? Now, I believe that part of the problem of all of this is the incoming message, right? So it's not just the outgoing, but it's also the incoming, because this is what creates multiple trails, and you sort of forget where you're communicating, what you're saying, who you're saying it to, and what it is that you're sharing. So why do I say incoming? So these are all just various places that I post stuff, right? So, there's Instagram. Sable is my name. Sable, for those who don't know, is the Hebrew word for picture. So I thought that was like a kind of a stupid play on name. My daughter saw that the first time I put up, and she said, "Dad, you're an idiot." What can I tell you? There's my influencer space on LinkedIn, there's my blog, there's the stuff I post on HuffPo, there's just a variety of these things. Now here's the problem, right? I get messages to every one of these. Like people send me stuff. And the truth is, I'd be just as happy to use my email. You want to talk to me, do it to what address, send me an email, because if you can't say it publicly, I'm really not interested in hearing what you have to say anyways. It's one central place where I have everything. It's easy for me to see. It's an easy thing for me to check. It's not Luddite. It's not snail mail. It's not last century. It's easy. And by the way, for those of you who don't realize, email is, was, and always will be a social media. We don't pretend. We pretend it's not because it doesn't play well for the analysts when we're trying to sell all the other ones. But here's the problem, right? So I get hundreds of these, and I answer them. So now I'm answering on Instagram, I'm answering on Facebook, I'm answering here, I'm answering there. I forget where I'm answering. So now, anybody wants to talk to me, anybody sends a message here, I send back, if you have anything to say, here's my email, send it to me here. Easiest way to keep track. Now, the truth is, in all of this, we still crave privacy. Now, I think this is really the moving trend away from auditorium-style social networks to more private group spaces shows there's a real need for a different type of social networking and message platform. It shows a preference for online authenticity and more private group spaces. Sorry, that's a lot of digibabble. But what they are right about is that people do want to have that way of communicating one-to-one. As I said, it used to be called email, we pretend it's not. So call it what you will. But definitely people want to get back to that ability. They want to have the ability to send you a message, to text you simply, and not have to worry about everybody else in the world seeing. And if you look at it, it really and truly is something that's happening. It's not just in social networks, I think just in general. People are looking again for privacy, looking for intimacy. They're looking to have things that are more unique to them and not for everybody. So I'm sure you've all heard about these underground dinner parties. They're not all that new, but they've gained some notoriety lately because, of course, everybody wants to be part of it. Now, the truth is, these things were happening long before there was digital social networks because they are interesting. And it's a great way of bringing people together and keeping privacy. But once again, they're becoming more and more prevalent because people are craving that intimacy. They want it. We see the same thing with music, and you also have a movie with what's his name? What's it called? He's looking for the rabbit band, whatever it was called, Bunny. I always forget. But there's more and more of this as well, where you are part of not a broadcast group. It's not like I'm looking to bring 10 million people to Tahrir Square. I'm looking to bring 500 people to hear a concert, and I want it really private and quiet because I want to be part of it. And retail is getting cozier as well. So even retail spaces are getting more intimate because people are craving that bit of intimacy because we live in a world where 24/7, everything is out there open and shared. Now this, I think, is the biggest issue, and that's the regulatory environment. Because the crazier it gets, and the more we have anxiety over oversharing, right? So we have anxiety about it, right? So we write about it, the regulators get worried about it, and then stuff happens like pictures getting pulled out of the ether, if you will, that we don't want to share. And so the regulators respond. So the first is the do not track kids, which I think is actually quite an important one, and allow kids to have an eraser button, or let their parents have an eraser button so that they won't be bombarded, they won't be shared, they won't have certain things. And then, of course, this is my favorite, is the right to be forgotten, which I think is like one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. Which is like, hell, you did it, you posted it, it's your problem, not mine. However, in Europe, it's actually gaining some traction. And the notion that, and this is where, I'm not necessarily a big fan of Google, because I think anybody that says, do no evil is probably hiding a lot. So it just amazes me that even these guys that I like to beat up on occasion are definitely right on this, because why is it their problem to erase this stuff? It confounds me. Having said that, I think there's only tip of the iceberg. Because I think that the more we allow, the more we think somehow that social networks are about unfettered sharing, and that everybody has the right to see who, what, and who and what you are and what you're doing, the more we're going to find regulatory environments coming down. This is great. Some of you might have read this. I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago. Moment and checking. So these are ways of just seeing like how much time you're wasting on your devices, which I thought was pretty interesting. And again, I think there's this movement towards it, because I think what people are beginning to realize is that they're self-regulating. So I think they're so worried and they're so scared and they're so overcome by this constant need to share and to check and to look that they're looking for ways themselves to regulate and to stop. And of course, I'm a big proponent of this notion of unplugging and reconnecting. So I've written about this a lot. So it's not Luddite. It doesn't mean throw your device away. But it means every once in a while unplug. So as I write this story, 24, so I'm 24/6, not 24/7. My boss, Martin Sorrell, is 24/8. I'm 24/6 though, because I take off, I'm observant, so I take off Friday night to Saturday night. Now what's really interesting to me, and I only realized it a couple of years ago, is that literally during the day, I have the Jones. Like I'm like this. If my device, anything, like if I'm not in front of a computer, if I'm not in front of a tablet, if I don't have my smartphone in front of me, I'm like, I check all the time. And at dinner, I'm like this under the table, close to my wife, she hates it. But comes Friday to Saturday night, I swear to God, I put it away, I don't think of it. I don't have to, no. I have a self-imposed no choice. So I believe that we all need to do this. I believe that the world needs to do this. Pick a day, an hour, pick a time period. It makes no difference. And just put it away. Stop answering. Just unplug. Reconnect with your environment. Reconnect with ideas. Reconnect with people. Reconnect with reality. Because I think if we don't, we're just going to be in a really, really bad place. And the truth is, I'm not the only one who believes this. Steve Jobs was a huge believer, so because I think it's actually kind of ironic that Steve Jobs was a believer in this. But he believed in limiting access of his kids to anything digital, and particularly social things, because he knew that there was more to life. Ever hear the Waldorf schools? Right? Next assignments, you got 2 assignments. This is the second one so far. Look them up. Bing, or Google, whichever you prefer. So the Waldorf School is really interesting. The schools in the United States, very high-end, incredible schools. They do not allow their students to have computers. Now, who wants to guess where the #1 Waldorf school in the country is? Silicon Valley. And who wants to guess who go there? The elite of the elite. So the children of the highest levels of Google, Facebook, whatever, they go to that school. They're not allowed to have computers. So in an interview, they asked one of the top Google executives, well, what's going on? Like, you don't send your kid to a school that uses computers? Because absolutely not. Yes, computers are easy to use. My kid will learn to use it in 10 seconds. We're making it easier every day. But I want them to learn how to think. So here's my movie scenario. My movie scenario is that 20 years from now, Google is laying all these, building all these power sources and laying all this fiber cable, pulls the plug on the whole world. The only people who know anything are their children. And they end up ruling the world. So, I just find it so instructive, because I think we need to learn from the people who are leading the so-called revolution, which I don't believe is a revolution, which another presentation altogether. But, when Google uses television to create, to do advertising, when they send mail, when Warby Parker and Google and Barnabas open stores, like physical stores, like down on street level, and they keep their children off of social networks. I just think it's time for the rest of us to take a step back, not be so linear, and not swallow the story whole all the time, and think on our own and do some other things. So just some final thoughts. Not going fast, but I only have 30 minutes. And then hopefully we get some questions and some dialogue. So the first is, I believe that accountability is more important than ever, and I think that's what you were talking about, Jerry. This notion of accountability is really critical. I wrote about it this week, actually. I want to tear lately about accountability. Now, This is from an influencer post called Don't Bother to Apply Here. The bulk of LinkedIn community understand that membership brings with it a sense of accountability. But sadly, there are still some outliers. Bottom line, my advice to people who still feel the internet is a place for catharsis instead of commentary, please note, we use these sources as references. We look at what people post and get a sense of the quality of discussion they drive. So it amazes me, this by the way was me, I wrote that. So it amazes me that there are people who post on LinkedIn, like they think they're posting anonymously on Yahoo or on Facebook or wherever, and instead of contributing to a discussion like, hey, maybe you don't agree with me, contribute to the discussion, they write all kinds of crap, like just foul personal stuff. And it blows my mind because they think it's their right. They have zero accountability. They believe it's their right in this world to do it. So I wrote this and I said, like, hey, do what you want, but don't come to me for a job. So the joke was that those same people, because I went back and checked to see who is posting against us. Oh, big company coming down on the little guy. So those were all the guys who were posting. Those are the guys who were posting all the garbage. But it amazes me that people just don't get it. Because we check. I imagine you do too. You'd be foolish not if you hired somebody and didn't check what they're doing on Facebook, what they're doing on LinkedIn. And you don't want to find out that you hired a neo-Nazi or whatever. Like you said, it'd be ridiculous, right? And it's easy to find out that. So accountability is more important than ever because the truth is, even if you're not accountable, if you don't feel the accountability, I'm going to make you accountable. And that's exactly what's happening in the regulatory environment. The second thing is relevance that leads to action. So we need accountability, but we need action. I think part of the problem that we have in general in the social space is that people think that they can get away by just putting their hand up. Like they think that's all they need to do. They put their hand up, they say, yeah, I think the ball is terrible. Well, I'm a good person, like, and you go home and you forget about it, you really don't care. We saw it, excuse me, Yale restaurants, how many people did the bucket? Put your hands up high. Okay, keep your hands up, don't put it down, hands up, to be honest. How many of you, when you did it, mentioned ALS, its devastation, said something really poignant about the disease, and made a donation at the same time? Keep your hands up. All of you? All right, this is the first audience I've ever had where everybody said that. So you guys are awesome. Usually, 80% of the hands go down, because most people do not, and that's fact. So the problem is they raise a lot of money, which is great, and they definitely did raise awareness because we tracked it. And we tracked it, by the way, just looking to see how many more people were looking up ALS on Wikipedia. So that was a pretty interesting way of looking. But they're concerned about next year because clearly the message didn't get across. I mean, there's just no question. They just didn't get it across enough because most people didn't bother to post what it was about. So we need to have relevance that leads to action. That's really the key, right? So we need to think about what is it that leads to action. Colbert wrote a great piece on this. You know, he's the new racist because he was told, I don't know if you saw it. Look at, you can find it on YouTube. He has a great posting. He was invited to speak at the university in California. They don't want to speak because he said something about Islam. And they're going to ask. But basically, his whole point is, like, cut this out. Like, stop this just sharing stuff and putting your hand up. If you have something to say, come and say it. Be accountable. Do what's important. But be relevant and let it lead to action. We call that, by the way, click and shout. So it's not enough just to click. You also have to shout. You have to go out and do something. If shouting is giving money. Shouting is saying that it's ALS, it's a devastating disease. Shouting could be, by the way, which is a very interesting story, if you know anything about the original Arab Spring in Tahrir Square, you know that the people didn't show up in the square until Vodafone took the internet down. So as long as the internet was up, lots of tweeting and lots of sharing, but people weren't out in the streets. When the internet went down, people had to come into the streets. And that's click and shout. That's really interesting. So you need to have that shouting, because without the shouting, then all of it, everything you've done, there's no accountability, right? There's no point to it, and all you've done is just kind
That
of...
was the point of the ice bucket challenge. It was click and shout, you got to challenge other people to do it.
Yeah, but
So
it wasn't,
into
no,
it itself.
not unless you mention the disease, what it was about, and donate it. See, many people, by the way, most in fact, if you go back and look, thought that all they had to do was challenge and not give, that was the point. And that wasn't the point. The point was, if you listen to the person there with the idea, it was to challenge and give. So you gave, you challenged, you said what the disease was, and then you had challenged someone else. Somehow it changed. It was, all right, if you do this, you don't have to give money. And so even guys, I'm telling you, the big stars who were doing it were just pouring water over their head and sharing it, and everybody thought that was cool. So,
They raised $50 million as opposed to what.
so again, clearly I wasn't clear. I said they raised a lot of money. Let me repeat myself, okay? They raised a lot of money, no question. And I did say that more people did look, and we used Wikipedia as a thing. However, they are concerned that next year they're not going to have that same response because they didn't make an emotional connection to the people on the disease. People don't know enough about it, and they weren't clear enough on it. So I think it is a good example, by the way, of what could have been click and shout. It didn't go all the way. That's my point, but you're right. So anyways, that's just some thoughts for an early morning, or an early mid-morning. And like I said, let's not make this the choice. Let's make the choice what we communicate, not the how of it. And any questions? Yes.
I just want to ask.
Stand up. Say who you are.
My name is Moshe. College. I wanted to get your thoughts on comments on news websites.
On.
Like New York Times, like Washington Post, like people write comments. You're talking about accountability, and like I just find like people tend to take very polarized views on like especially like political conversations, or people just write things like they're not thinking, and their name is there. And so, what are your thoughts on that? Then in terms of accountability, how can companies enforce accountability there? And is it worth trying? Because
That's a good question. I mean, people, I don't think they can. I mean, what you can do is you can take down. There are some people who do have a delay and they read the stuff just to make sure that it's nothing inflammatory. Others don't do that because they think it's sort of against the rules. I think it's hard to do, and by the way, I think, and maybe this is the point you're making, I think it ruins the conversation. See, I love conversations that are pointed and heated and hot, but when it becomes personal, and to your point, read a great New York Times on any day. In fact, I came from breakfast with the managing editor. Like, think about a conversation, Judy, about whatever topic. And let's pick an inflammatory topic. Let's pick Israelis and Palestinians, right? Sometimes when you read the crap that gets posted underneath it, like whatever you think of the article, it's just, there are no arguments there. It's, you're a this, you're a that, you're a moron, you're a Nazi, you're a terrorist, you're a murderer, you're a child. It's like back and forth. Like, okay, great. Let's get that out of the way. What are we talking about? What's the issue? So you're right. I think that's part of the problem. That's why we need to have accountability. Now the bigger problem there is that it's easier to post semi-anonymously, like you think you're anonymous, right? And very often you are because nobody really knows necessarily who you are or who your email leads to. And I think that's also part of the problem. So if it was linked to you, like with your picture, and I knew it was you. By the way, Facebook is having this problem again. Because there are people who are starting to create, it's going back to the false IDs and stuff and phony pictures, and it's becoming a real issue for them. So I don't know how to enforce it other than we need some level of civility. We need to do something as a group of people, digital caring people, to force it. So I write about it all the time, and I'm very clear that I won't hire people who do that. Right, so now I do check. I will not hire people who post that. I won't do it. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mark Strauss from Sable Media, and I'm actually a huge fan of email. So you're one of the few people I've heard speak on this issue. We receive about 10,000 emails a week, and to be completely honest, I personally answer about 500 of them. So they do get filtered, but. I'm one of the first to give out my email and ask people to contact me, but the issue I have with what you brought up is quite often I get the most valuable information from perhaps my response to somebody else's response in a thread on a post. So somebody will post something on Instagram, I'll respond on Instagram, and then a listener who may not have ever posted and certainly wouldn't have taken the time to email you directly will then respond with a very, very thoughtful response. And when we pull it off of those other networks, not that the conversation isn't interesting, and sometimes it certainly belongs off of those networks. But I feel like we do lose potentially some of that interaction.
So that's a huge point, and I agree with you, but that's different. So in other words, you're absolutely right. That's, in the context of that discussion, that's where it belongs. My point was that I get all this incoming that comes to me, not necessarily about the topic, but people see it's me, so I'll get on Instagram, oh, can we come show you our newest technology next Tuesday? Like, hello, why do you do that? So I have everything going, so what I try to do is I have a lot of things as my huge tech guy back there who supports me on all these things knows. So I have everything, I try to bring things into one mailbox, by the way, it's just a lot easier. But sometimes it blows my mind, like, just sort of like these, and I just don't know what to do. So I just send it back and say, look, make it easier for me. So you're right.
But clearly you have to check.
Yeah, in the context of that discussion, that's exactly where it belongs. Because just like you post on a story, you post whatever, I want it in that thread. Because that's where it should have the most interest, and that's where it should give us the most value in terms of the discussion. That absolutely clear. My only point was that when you start posting and people start sending you personal messages within that context that have nothing to do with that, it just gets very confusing and you sort of forget where you're posting stuff. And then you end up in this mess. So that answered.
Absolutely.
Next. Yeah, Jay.
How the line has changed between running a company, you talk about intimate cast, how the line has changed between what's public and what's private and company.
So everybody hear the question? So my view is that there's nothing that's private. And by the way, that has nothing to do with digital. I believe this 20 years ago we just had memos. So I've always run my businesses on the belief that whatever we put out finds its way to somebody that you probably don't want to see it. So don't put anything down unless you're happy with the world reading it. I think that's true. So that's how I manage it. I don't believe you send things in private in emails. Certainly, if you have anybody that uses a lawyer, lawyers will tell you this all the time, because first of all, we can forensically go back and we do forensic checks. I can't tell you stuff that we've found in doing forensic checks on is any little thing. People who have left or have done whatever, and then I kind of discover that they've been using your company to funnel drug money. It did not really happen here, but it is possible, right? So you find these things. So never, my advice is, write nothing, say nothing that you would be embarrassed if it became public. Because if you did, you're making a huge mistake. As Anthony Weiner learned in New York. Yeah. Your name, who you are.
Rich.
Loud, so we can.
My name is Rich. My question is, do you think today there's any point in leading something that you're posting in one way or another? You'll have that moment where you look back and say, wow, I posted this. Is there a point to even leading it?
Yeah, I mean, the only point in deleting, so the question was, is there any point in deleting something that when you look back 6 months and say, oh shit, I can't believe I actually put that. So, I just give you absolute true point. So, every time I get angry, I think, all right, I'm gonna write memos, I'm really pissed off. So, my wife always said to me, write it, don't send it, delete it. And then write it again. So that's what I do. So anytime I write anything for posting, before I post it, I delete it or mentally delete it at least, and then say, okay, is that what I should do? Now the only point in deleting it 6 months later, so everybody's read it and it's done the damage. So the only thing you've done is you've taken it off the general public record. It could be found if somebody was looking for it, but then your defense will always be, look, I deleted it because I made a mistake. So, yeah, you could delete it, but, you know, if you think that you've deleted it because no one will ever find it, you're just fooling yourself, because they will. Answer the question? Yeah,
Hi, I'm Alex.
laugh.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm from Campus Pursuit, a startup from Binghamton, New York. And I had a question about the transition from analyzing data, like you talked about Wikipedia and ALS, to changing behavior, like Facebook's, experiments on users, showing more or less, positive news, and also they actually help people vote more or less on another experiment. So what are your thoughts on that?
So first of all, this was not like, Nazi experimentation, let's be clear. And not only was it not, it's like almost a duh. To me, it was the stupidest thing I ever read. Like, why did I need Facebook to experiment to know that if you write positive stuff, you get positive response? I could have, it's the business I'm in. I could have told you that like 30 years ago when I first started the business. When I 40 years ago, I forget how old I am. When I started the business. So the truth is, it's true. If you positive, you get a positive response. You never get that response. I mean, that's life. That's absolutely positively true. Can I get you to vote? What's really interesting is that Facebook, I'm on the user council, I was on the creative council from the beginning. One of the things that when I started working very early on, is like, guys, do you understand that you are a direct medium? Like, forget everything else. You are the newest evolution of direct response advertising. That's it, full stop. That is what Facebook is. And so, what's interesting is that it took a while for them to understand it, took a while for the creative community to understand it. When you get, the little, cut through a little blue line or, just a link to go to something else, that is the ultimate direct response. So in the old days, you pick up the phone. Or you'd send a letter, even before that. Like when I was young, you cut out these little things in the back of the comic books. Remember? You cut out these little ads in the back of the comic books, and you get the 6-foot-tall dinosaur, which turned out to be this huge balloon that was like ridiculous. It was like a ripple, but they obviously made a lot of money. That was their response, and that's what they are. So can they get you to vote more? And they experimenting. They're experimenting on direct response. So I can show you how I can get better response from you by sending email. I can show you how I can get better response by sending you a thing. All of these things are direct response. So they're just playing around with the latest evolution of a channel that allows that kind of response. Does that answer the question?
Okay,
Anyone, if you have time for
we're gonna take one more question and then we're gonna break.
Okay, one more question, you got a break, and then you can talk to me at the break. Anyone else? No more questions? Where? Oh, yeah, stand up, laugh.
I'm obviously big fan of what you just said. Is there a place to get these slides?
Yeah, we'll make it available to everybody.
Thanks.
In Zula.
Sharing, because you'll find this anyways, right? So, all right, anyway, thank you all so much. Enjoy the day. Thank you, Zula.